Is the Bible 100% literal? And if not, how do you tell when to interpret it literally and when not to? Great question. Great question. The Bible is 100% literal where it's literal, and 100% figurative where it's figurative, and 100% poetic where it's poetic. And here's it's not that complicated, honestly. Because if I gave you a book, just a regular book, and I said, tell me what in this is poetry, tell me what is trying to be history, tell me what is using a metaphor, and you would be able to do it quite easily. In fact, if you read the scripture, it's not difficult to tell where the Bible's being all of those things. What happens is sometimes people want to say, I don't really like this literal part, this historical part, so I'm going to say it's poetic or metaphorical. A lot of people, especially in the 20th century, late 19th, early 20th into the mid 20th century, a lot of people went to sort of liberal theology, not a political term, more like progressive Christianity now, where they started doing a lot of that kind of stuff with say Genesis 1 through 8. And they're like, well, these probably aren't literal stories. Maybe they're just metaphors to help us think about it and so on. Just not true. They're written as history. It's very clear the genre that's there. You cannot change it to metaphor because you don't like it or because somebody who's doing science says it probably didn't happen that way. Let me just tell you something. I'm not anti-science. I'm super pro-science. I love science. Science is not perfect. And what I mean by that is scientists are not perfect. And so if a scientist says, look at how many things have happened. They said that King David never was a real person, that was probably metaphorical. Oops, when they found the inscriptions to King David. And we're like, oh, I guess we were wrong. But I can't tell you how many of those have happened. Every single thing in the scripture has always been questioned until they do the archaeology and they go, oh yeah, this is the exact place and the exact thing. Oh, here's the house. And there's his, listen, the scripture is true. It is true. And where it's literal, where it's doing history, those things happened. Those are things that happen. Where it's doing poetry, that has a different purpose. The Proverbs, for instance, they have a different purpose. No, it's not history when it says, the lazy man did this thing. It's not like, oh, there was a lazy man right here who did that. It's a proverb. You know how proverbs work. And there are times where it's like, God is like, and we see simile or we see metaphor, where he's showing us something through that. All of that is not there are very few places in the scripture where it's difficult for you to be able to tell. So all literal, in other words, all of it is trying to say something that is true or is saying something that's true. But it's a big book. There are different things within that book. And you'll find that in any book you read, by the way. Go read a book and you'll find places where the person's talking specifically, this thing happened. Then you'll find places where somebody is talking metaphorically, trying to make a point with a metaphor. All of that. We do it all the time and we're able to do that. It's the same thing with scripture. Same thing with scripture. All of it is true. Some of it is intended to be these ways. One of those places where people get confused about that is the first 8 chapters of Genesis or the first 11, sometimes depending on who you talk to, which they're wrong about that. And then prophecy can be difficult because is this talking about a literal thing that's going to happen or is this a thing like this is going to happen? And the best way to go through that is with what we call a hermeneutic, which is a way of interpreting scripture and applying that hermeneutic consistently to the text to be able to understand most of the stuff. You'll know what's poetry and you'll know what's history very easily.
Pastor DRob.